Welcome to the Clemson Dubcast, Friday, August 20th. August camp winding down for Clemson. And, man, we have been hitting it hard, Paul Strelo and I, and we were just talking earlier this morning. Not to beat our chests or anything, but we're proud of the depth of covers that we provide, the different ideas, the assorted mailbags through the week, the what coaches are telling us, on top of all the important nuggets that we're picking up from the practices. Again, not to sound too full of ourselves here, but we're proud of the product we provide, and we don't think there's anything like it in the Clemson market. So if you're out there and you haven't signed up yet, now is a wonderful time to do it at TigerIllustrated.com. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse, and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's PARHAM law.com. Celero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham, Smith, and Archenhold. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. Okay, our first conversation with David Paschall, Chattanooga Times-Free Press, Georgia writer. Keep in mind, this occurred several days ago before the news about Darnell Washington and Tyke Smith. All right, here we go. Enjoy. All right, joined by my good friend, long time, man. It's been 2 decades. Is that real? 20 years, I guess we've known each other.
Yeah, it has. And Larry, it's a pleasure to be on here. You've always been great about coming on my show in Chattanooga. So it is nice to return the favor.
All right, I'm curious, how do you, all right, obviously you still write for the Chattanooga Times-Free Press, but you cover in Georgia and also other SEC schools, none of which are in Chattanooga, so quite a bit of travel. And you still have a radio show like Monday through Friday?
Yeah, 3 to 6 every afternoon. And actually, starting last year, Larry, I added Tennessee to my plate. So I actually covered more Tennessee than Georgia last year, and I'll cover more Tennessee than Georgia this year. But the schedule works out to where Tennessee opens on a Thursday night, September 2nd against Bowling Green. So 2 nights later, I'll get to be in Charlotte. And then Tennessee does not play when Georgia and Florida play. So, Georgia's got that really unique schedule this year because really, when you think about it, their home schedule is not great. I mean, their 3 biggest games are Clemson and Charlotte, Florida and Jacksonville and Auburn and Auburn. So the Sanford Stadium schedule this year is pretty weak.
Maybe not as weak as Clemson's home schedule. It's something else. But so I'm just curious. So like, for example, a few years ago, Georgia plays at LSU. Do you do your radio show on Friday and then head for Baton Rouge? How does that work?
That is there are a couple of times a year where and the game in Jacksonville is one I've covered for 23 straight years or something like that. So that's one that they have to get a fill in for me on a Friday. I'll call in from the road type of thing. But no, there are a couple of times a year where, I absolutely have to bail on a Friday or else I'll be getting to my destination in the wee hours of the morning.
Is the radio thing something sort of you fell into, or actually something you aspired to and sort of worked your way into?
Well, as you know, our business through the years have kind of had the challenges, and I guess one way to combat it is to move up the ladder via a bigger market. I mean, that can be in all media forms, whether it's a bigger newspaper, a bigger TV station, a bigger radio market. And then another way is just to try to do as much as you can in the same market. And so back in 2013, I proposed to the paper the possibility of doing this, and because the station was interested in it, and the paper saw it as an extension of the paper. So it's in a way it's a 3-hour infomercial for the paper, because we talk about articles that have been in the Chattanooga Times-Free Press, whether it's a big high school football preview of a game or something that's happened around town that's non-sports related. So it's been a win-win, and obviously I hope that can continue.
I've various times over the years, I've been on the radio, like the local radio station here, WCCP, the flagship station. There was a time where I would go in for a couple hours once or twice a week with a friend to a friend's radio show, and I've resolved that I am just not enough of a sports junkie to have to fill 15 hours a week. Like if somebody called me and asked me what I thought of the latest happenings with like the Braves, I would be able to say nothing. Are you just a natural at that? You're kind of a sports junkie. You keep up with everything, or are you more specialized? Like, how does that work?
Well, you bring up a very good point, because yes, there is a nerd aspect to me. I mean, you can ask me a college football. I can tell you every Iron Bowl score from the last 40 years. I can tell you who won the national championship, who won the Heisman Trophy. I love the Masters, and so I can tell you every Masters winner of the last 40 years. But you're exactly right. When you do radio, you have to certainly hone up on the Braves. I mean, we are a Braves affiliate. I think we're the biggest market outside of Atlanta that carries the Braves. And so I've got to know my Braves, I've got to know my Falcons, and I've got to know my Titans. But it is just a huge college football area. I mean, we are so close to, when you think about just leaving Chattanooga, within 5 hours, you can drive to Knoxville, you can drive to Lexington, you can drive to Nashville, you can drive to Birmingham, you can drive to, Tuscaloosa, you can drive to Auburn, you can drive to Athens, you can drive to Columbia. So, I mean, you get a huge chunk of the SEC, and UTC is, there's a little bit of a niche for UTC, but not a big one. But again, it's a good high school football area, and kind of back to our talking about balancing both things. When you talk about, man, I could never fill 15 hours. I have those same challenges, especially in like June. But, Mark Wiedmer is our longtime columnist at the Times-Free Press. And so today at 4:20, we have our Wednesdays with Weeds. That's always 4:20?
And his name's Weed at 4:20? Yeah, it's Weeds?
It's 4:20 every Wednesday. We have our Wednesdays with Weeds. And then Stephen Hargis is like our just guru on the high school front. I mean, I've never seen anyone dominate a storyline. Like if there is a coaching change or like a scandal in high school football, I mean, he breaks every single story along those lines. And so, we cover like 52 high schools in our area, Tennessee, Georgia, and into Alabama. And so, I mean, Stephen just always has the pulse on that. So we have Stephen on. I'm not going to say we have him on every week, but it's pretty close. So again, that's kind of the whole Times-Free Press infomercial type thing, because I'm always relying on those two to contribute, because they're so knowledgeable on different stuff.
You mentioned this a few minutes ago, but just the dramatic changes in sort of the newspaper industry and really the overall media landscape. I mean, 20 years ago when we were both covered Georgia, I was in Augusta. And back then, I remember, getting out of college and my first few years working for the Augusta paper and even the Charleston paper when I moved on to cover Clemson. You see like in the press box, you see Mark Bradley or Tony Barnhart Furman Bisher, even when he was the late Furman Bisher, when he was still working. And those people are larger than life. Barnhart, Mr. College Football, you have to read him. He's essential. And even like the beat guys, Mark Schlaball just did a tremendous job. I remember looking at those guys and being like, wow, it'd be amazing to be able to do that at the AJC. And whereas now, you couldn't, I wouldn't take a job with the AJC because it's just turned upside down almost. What do you make of the overall landscape? Not necessarily with newspapers totally, but just from the perspective of what has happened to the voices, like the influential voices that cover college football, I guess mainly in terms of an overall perspective. It's kind of a shell of what it used to be. Am I right?
Yeah, and it's funny when you start reeling off those names because you give the exact same impression of the way I go around. I mean, I am, there's a lot of arrogance in our industry. I mean, we've all met people that are just like, whoa, that guy thinks he just is hot snot. But I'm like, when you start talking about like Jack Wilkinson and Steve Hummer, on top of the Mark Bradleys of the world, and you think about the lineup that the AJC had 15 or 20 years ago. I mean, I remember just reading their stuff and just looking in the mirror going, I'm nowhere close to that. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, those guys were phenomenal. And we actually had Mark Bradley on our show about a month ago, just because I've always loved Mark. I thought he was just great at getting right to the point. Yep. and just, I mean, he's been unbelievable for years. And he had the funniest story about, because he got to the AJC around 84, I guess it was 83 or 84. And so he went 7 straight Falcons seasons and 7 straight Braves seasons without covering a winner. So he went 14. He had like a 14 season cycle of Braves and Falcons without covering a winner. Of course, the Braves provided him a lot of good times, and the Falcons have too, but some up and downs. But no, I mean, I do. I cherish that stuff. And yes, we have now morphed into the world where there's more of a, I don't know if it's a hot take, shock value, stuff like that. And this didn't just happen yesterday. I mean, this has been going on for several years now. I mean, it's just, you've got the clickbait term where, you'll see a site that says, has this 5-star changed his mind? And you click on it and there's like, no, he hasn't changed his mind. I mean, it's that kind of stuff where it has degraded our industry. Horrible. And it's just, and it's one of those that, gosh, I mean, we're talking Atlanta, but if you kick things over to Birmingham, Larry, I mean, the Birmingham News has printed 3 days a week now for I don't know how long. They have a Sunday print section to recap the Alabama-Auburn games, but they don't have they don't have a Saturday print section to recap the high school. And so I think they go Monday, Wednesday, Sunday or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. But I know it's 3 days a week, and I know it's through I think it's Huntsville, I think it's Birmingham, Mobile. They're all in that same chain along with New Orleans. New Orleans has been printing 3 days a week. So, it's sad. And I know we'll only talk for about 30 minutes, but I could go 30 hours on the subject of, if you go back and do the history, I mean, there is just this phenomenal history with SEC football or college football in general and the newspaper industry. I mean, you think about just some of the terms through the years that were labeled, by sports writers back in the 1920s and 1930s, and even the swamp down at Florida. I mean, Steve Spurrier conferred with Mike Bianchi on the nickname, and and it's stuff like that, and of course now every single move that is happening in college athletics is television related, whether it's conference realignment, whether it's expanding the college football playoff, and I'm just not. I'm not a fan of a lot of this stuff. And it's one of these things that I thought when the SEC added South Carolina and Arkansas back in 1992, to go from 10 to 12, I mean, I thought that was fine because you were still playing a lot of teams from the opposite divisions. And then in 2012 when they added Texas A&M and Missouri, and it's nothing against those universities, but ever since then the league has just felt huge. I mean, Texas A&M joined in 2012, and I don't think Georgia goes to College Station until like 2024. I mean, that's ridiculous. Wow. Missouri still hadn't come to Auburn. I mean, they're just the conference just feels gigantic. I mean, I'm an Auburn graduate, and Auburn used to play Tennessee and Florida every year. And of course that changed when the divisions happened in 1992, but now you'll have an Auburn Tennessee or Auburn Florida game once every 7 years, and that's just gross to me.
Sort of sticking with the same topic of sort of how much things have changed with that, the media and all that. Georgia and Kirby Smart, the access to be kind is not good for the media. What has that been like for you as you try to sort of, I mean, every newspaper or every reporter worth his credential is constantly trying to get beneath the surface to learn more about what he's covering so he can tell his readers more about what he or she is covering. And so what has that been like for you? Because I remember, of course, I know we sound like dinosaurs here back in my day, in our day back when Jim Donnan and Mark Richt were there, it was kind of like you could talk to pretty much whoever you wanted to talk to. You were embraced, and now it's like seems like the opposite, where they're trying like hell not to give you anything. Or am I being too extreme there?
No. I mean, that is, but it's interesting, and this is where I try to have a little more of a balanced perspective, just in my unique role of being responsible for multiple teams. I mean, I don't cover any of, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama to the detail that you cover Clemson, but it's one of these things where you're exactly right. When Mark Richt first got there, the coaching and player availability was through the roof. I mean, I remember having lunch at McWhorter Hall in Athens where you'd be sitting at the table with Brian Van Gorder and Willie Martinez.
Yes.
And it was just like, they'd be like, I got married in 2000 and Willie'd be like, hey, how's the married life treating you? And, it was stuff like that. I mean, they realized we didn't bite. I mean, we were normal people that were married, that were starting to raise families just like they were. And so, I don't know if it's just because of the, I know that, I guess in 2002, you had Rivals and Scout, correct, come aboard.
Yep.
And then there have been others that have joined, I guess Scout's fallen by the wayside, but, 24/7 comes along. You've had I know their demands through the years have increased, and I get that. But it is an extreme when Georgia has two just kind of random players yesterday. They'll have a couple more, I would assume, tomorrow, and then Kirby after the second scrimmage on Saturday. And, of course, last week's Georgia availability was the defensive coordinator, Dan Lanning, last Tuesday. You had Todd Monken last Thursday, and then you had Kirby after the first scrimmage. So Georgia went all week last week without providing a player. And so that's kind of and it is a frustrating dynamic, especially for those like a Mark Weiser who's been on that beat, a Chip Towers who's been on that beat for a long time. Of course, in the case of Alabama, that is so incredibly structured to where when Saban speaks, I mean, there have been Saban press conferences that have been as quick as 5.5 minutes. And that's with like a 1.5-minute opening statement. Sometimes they just really rush through their thing. So 10 minutes, if Saban's still speaking after 10 minutes, he's getting, I would imagine, pretty ticked off. And Josh Maxson knows to end that thing really quick. And I tell you, the Georgia and Bama examples just to set up what Tennessee's doing, because, last year with Jeremy Pruitt, I mean, that was a Saban disciple. So, you would get a couple of players a week you get Pruitt on a Monday at lunch, you'd get a couple of players on Tuesday around lunch, and then you get Pruitt after practice, around dinner time Wednesday. And that was all you got from Tennessee. But Josh Heupel has come in and has made all of his assistants and has just dumped all of his roster to where they have been available. It's been wild. It's kind of wild. The media will complain about everything, but the only thing you can complain about with Tennessee is like earlier this week they had a couple of receivers and the running backs coach. It'd be good to have them like all, a couple of receivers and the receivers coach, but that's just being nitpicky compared to some of what the other writers in the league are having to do that have much stricter guidelines they're having to adhere to.
Do you think, I mean, because it's natural and fair, I think, to say, okay, these coaches, there's so much more money at stake. Therefore, they're so much more paranoid about controlling the message because any kind of random quote, whereas it used to be in a newspaper the next day, now, 5 seconds later, it goes viral all over social media. Coaches are more paranoid now. That seems to be a fact. But in fairness, we have played a role in this too, in that the old way of doing things was if you criticize a coach or whoever, you're there the next day in person and you have a relationship with that coach that you're criticizing. And so you might have it out with that coach the next day, but you move on and the relationship continues versus now, man, it's such a murky sort of relationship, or it's not even a relationship, I guess, because sort of the national folks are now the ones who are full of hot takes and taking those shots like right away when they don't even really have the full context of a press conference or a question and answer session. And now coaches are just like, well, shoot, why in the world should I give these people access to my players? Is that valid to you, that part of it?
Oh, I mean, everything you just said was spot on. I don't get me wrong. The media there's a lot of blame to go around with the media and how this is all transpired. I mean, there have been countless examples of media members just using a fragment of an entire quote that takes it completely out of context, just to get a tweet that has a bunch of retweets and likes and stuff like that. So, absolutely. But I thought, bringing in a couple of people we've already talked about, Kirby Smart and Mark Bradley. Kirby, the one that the news conference that he had, or the Zoom call, I should say, that he had, not last Saturday, but the Saturday before, he was asked, because Bradley was like, Claude Felton called on him fairly deep into the Zoom call, and Mark Bradley goes, Kirby, so far today you've been asked about your vaccination rate.
Yeah,
you've been asked about Oklahoma and Texas coming into the league, and you've been asked about name, image, and likeness deals. Is this what you signed up for? And it was a great question,
yeah.
and it's why Mark Bradley's Mark Bradley, and Kirby's like, he's like, just what I just told you. I agree with everything you've just said. He's like, no, this isn't what you sign up for. I sign up for the building relationships with the kids. I wanted to be a coach, but you find yourself much more of a manager than a coach. And no, I just thought it was a really good question and a really good, honest response.
What is your sort of initial take on this matchup on September 4th? Such a captivating clash between two ridiculously talented teams. And I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but just to sort of segue into this, I did over the summer, I added up all the combined former 5-stars of this matchup on both rosters, former 5-stars, compared with their last matchup in 2014. And those two teams were pretty freaking talented. Yeah, Deshaun Watson, Todd Gurley, those weren't
Nick
pushovers.
Chubb as a freshman breaking one at the end.
Those weren't pushovers. Those two teams combined for 7 former 5-stars, by my math. The current two teams combined for 26. That's
incredible.
This could be one of those. How they, we continue to talk about the old Miami, Florida State matchups, and then more recently those Alabama LSU matchups and how much NFL talent they produce. This feels like that's in that same sort of category.
It does, and it's funny you bring up Alabama LSU. There were a couple of NFL scouting directors that used to help me out with articles. I've never been a huge fan of writing anonymous stories, but once a year I would write a story about the Alabama LSU game and use a couple of anonymous NFL scouting directors who were great because they would rank the top 10 players in this Saturday night's Alabama LSU game. But no, I mean, it's going to be, yes, talent galore. And, credit to Dabo because, I mean, it seems like Clemson's 11, 12, and beyond win seasons happened a little bit before their recruiting got into that 1, 2, 3, 4 national type of deal. And so, whereas Georgia's always, been way up there in those rankings. But, to answer your question, I love the matchup of, just like everybody else, Georgia's offense against Clemson's defense. I think, obviously one of the keys to the game, because Clemson's had some issues up front offensively in camp staying healthy, right? Haven't they had a setback or two? And Georgia's had a setback or two. And so when you look at what these two teams have up front defensively, I mean, I think that could certainly factor into the game, because Clemson wants to be healthy up front to avoid Jordan Davis having a big game. And vice versa if you're Georgia, because you've got Warren Erickson, an interesting situation there, learning, trying to snap right-handed after breaking a bone in his left hand. So just kind of a interesting deal on that front. But I think the Georgia offense against the Clemson defense could be a whole lot of fun. So naturally, it'll probably be the reverse of that decides the outcome.
Is the bigger concern for Georgia right now those issues that you mentioned on the offensive line, or at receiver, where they've had so many injuries, not just George Pickens, but Eric Gilbert's out, I don't know, I guess indefinitely. Darnell Washington's hurt, Kyrus Jackson's hurt, and then a couple more, right?
Yeah, and that was news to a lot of people that Jermaine Burton suffered an ankle injury like the first couple of days of preseason camp. And so he was an absolute star as a freshman last year. So, that's certainly a factor. You think about Dominic Blaylock has been nice when he's healthy, but, he's not going to be back from all indications, with the ACL he suffered a year ago, just, trying to get back. And, of course, no Pickens because that happened in March. But, Adonai Mitchell is a freshman from Texas that has been getting a lot of rave reviews and practice recently, that a lot of people think he could have a similar type of impact that Jermaine Burton did last year for them. So, it's a little bit, it does absolutely cause you to temper the when you think about like JT Daniels, you've got a full year of him and the potential there. You've got your top 5 running backs. You're so deep at running back if you're Georgia, but then you're just kind of like, okay, what's the deal at receiver? Are you going to have enough to kind of make things work? That's on top of the line issue. That's on top of the Erickson. If Erickson can't snap right-handed to Smart's liking, Kirby's already said he's going to move him to guard and give somebody else a shot. And you've got a very versatile, talented guy like Jamari Sawyer, but, will you wind up using Sawyer at his best position or the position that will help you the most given some other setback type deals?
And heck, who is the last, team to win these types of games? And I guess I'm talking national championship games without that dynamic playmaker out on the outside, or playmakers, plural. You probably have to go back to LSU in 2007, I guess, when they had kind of an ordinary offense, maybe. But that's how you win these types of games now, it seems, right?
It is, and it's not like those guys don't exist on either of these rosters.
Well, so, I'm talking mainly about Georgia, just with their attrition.
Obviously with Ross back,
he's pretty good.
But, Larry, the plan is still for Burton and Kyrus Jackson to be good to go.
Yeah.
And, the top 3 receivers for Georgia last year were Jackson, Burton, and Pickens. And so you'll have 2 of the 3 that are – so I have not read anything or even heard anything off the record that leads me to believe that they won't be full strength on the 4th.
Gotcha. David, you were in Clemson in 2003. When Georgia came in, season opener, it was about 119 degrees, noon game, and that was supposed to be Clemson's coming out party. And they got just crushed, 30-0 with David Pollock, David Green, Fred Gibson. And at that time, Dabo Swinney was a first-year receivers coach who had been in commercial real estate for 2 years. People wondered why Bowden even hired him. During that era, Clemson was just this chronic underachiever. You're wondering if they'll ever get back to national prominence. From the outside looking in, what have you made of what has happened here? Is the sort of the majestic sort of tapestry, I guess. I guess I'm getting into Mark Bradley, trying to want to be Mark Bradley territory here with these words, but the Dabo has weaved just amazing on by any definition. What he's done. What does it look like from the outside looking in?
Real quick, back to that 0-3 game. I left Chattanooga at 6 a.m. and got to the Clemson-Anderson exit at 9. I mean, I flew. I should say 9:15. It was actually closer to 9:15. I got to that exit at 9:15 and pulled into my parking spot at 11:45. 2.5 hours of traffic. And you're exactly right. It was just a sauna. And so going from the car to the press box, I mean, I was a bit gamey. And then I looked over and saw Weeds, and Weaver was just sopping wet. But I mean, and that's the other thing I'll remember about that game. I'll never forget sitting in traffic for 2.5 hours. But I'll also never forget, because I went to Clemson games a couple of times when I was in high school and college, and the dynamic of letting the fans on the field after the game has always been very interesting to me. And then when you talk about a 30-0 game where Odell Thurman and Thomas Davis are just teeing off on anything Clemson could do that day, I actually was near Tommy Bowden and heard him have to endure several unpleasant things that I would not want to repeat. But back to your question, I mean, Tommy Bowden did a very nice job there. And, you kind of think about it in stages. And I guess stage one would have been the 2008 Chick-fil-A game where Alabama just handed it to Clemson. Yeah. And then 5 or 6 games later, Tommy Bowden says, I'm done. Dabo gets it on an interim role or whatever the case may be. And, you had a situation where for a couple of years there, nothing really looked any different. And then, I think when LSU in that Peach Bowl game, I thought that was kind of a huge step for that program because, I mean, it just showed that they could take a team in the SEC, maybe not a national championship team, but certainly an LSU and a team that has tons and tons of talent. And so I thought that was a big step in Clemson's progression. And then it is. I mean, when you ask about it, it does blow the mind because, Larry, for years, I thought there wasn't a greater job in college football than Florida State. I mean, it was just one of those when you think about the location, you think about the talent, the climate, everything about it, the history it was rocking up. And then you think about its path to the BCS championship game at the time and then the playoff. But the job that Dabo has done, and it really does show you how much money plays into college sports because the Alabamas, the Clemsons, and the Georgias of the world have broken away. And I'm sure there are others like Ohio State. I'm not in that part of the country that can. You're talking about programs that have absolutely invested in facilities, support staffs. I mean, every budget, recruiting, everything you can do, they have built. And so a Clemson all of a sudden looks far more financially robust than a Florida State. Yeah. Just like an Alabama looks more robust than a lot of teams in the SEC through the years that have racked up league championships like Auburn and Tennessee type thing. I know Auburn's working on they've announced groundbreaking for a new facility, but I mean, it's just Bama is just rolling in that area. Georgia is rolling in that area. Clemson is rolling in that area. So, I mean, it really does show the finances and how some teams have broken away from others financially that you may not have thought of. Because like I said, I thought Florida State was the best job in this country for years. But, and then to just go toe-to-toe with Alabama. I was not there for the game out in Arizona, but I was, I did see you down there in Tampa covering that one. that just put them on the map. And then to do what they did to Alabama and the Bay Area, I mean, was unbelievable. Nobody thought that could happen to a Saban team. So it has absolutely been remarkable. Like I said, I think the LSU win in the Peach Bowl kind of gave them some clout that they just continued to build and build, but they invested when other teams and other programs didn't. And you've seen it in the SEC, which is why Alabama and Georgia are picked to win their leagues every year, their divisions.
David Paschall, you do a great job, and man, glad to finally have you on the podcast, and looking forward to September 4th, man. It should be a lot of fun.
That will be fun. What a monster get for Charlotte. And, I don't know how much longer these games have when you think about, I know these two teams are going to play in Atlanta down the road for Gary Stokan. But, I talked to Stokan at SEC Media Days, and these things are harder and harder for him to land just because you've got a lot of programs that are announcing home and homes now and not doing the neutral site thing. So what a great get for Charlotte. They've never had one of this magnitude.
Well, if Georgia ends up in Clemson later on as planned, I will give you some backup directions that you can get here maybe a little more quickly. Some shortcuts.
You sound like some of the people that ask me about Auburn, because I mean that's one of the places I don't complain about just because I know the ins and outs. So yes, the next time I'm there, and what a great place Clemson is. Yes, the next time I'm there, that would be awesome.
All right, David. Thank you so much.
All right, enjoyed it, Larry. Take care.
If you're in the Eastern Midlands and PD area and you're in any way interested in buying and selling a home, commercial property, land, need to consider reaching out to Uptown Realty. They're based out of Sumter and run by a friend of mine, Patrick Enzer, big Clemson guy, used to cover the Tigers in a newspaper capacity, longtime supporter of Tiger Illustrated, longtime listener to the Dubcast. The home buying process should be an enjoyable experience, so let Patrick and his staff do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 803-774-0435 or go to uptownrealtysc.com. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Matt's office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. All right, joined by Dayne Young from our sister site. Why is it called sister? Why not brother, cousin site? I'm not sure how it became known as sister. UGAsports.com.
All in the family, I guess.
We're all related. We're all related somehow, I guess. But appreciate you joining us. Really want to dig into this amazing, compelling matchup on September 4th, but also want to talk some industry stuff. David Paschall of the Chattanooga Times-Free Press was on the first part of this podcast, and we're talking about, he and I are old timers, like old newspaper guys, and we're talking about how things have changed. And I don't know a lot about your background, but you work in the Georgia College of Communications in addition to doing your stuff for UGAsports.com, the Rivals site. So can you maybe give us a brief sort of description of what all you do?
Yeah. So let me give you the backstory of how I got to this point. So the dream for me growing up, and I'm a kid of the 90s, was to be a sports broadcaster. When I realized that I did not have the talent of Chipper Jones, I just wanted to talk about Chipper Jones. And that's kind of the path that I grew up in Middle Georgia. I went to Georgia Southern University for 2 years. I transferred up to UGA and graduated with my degree in digital and broadcast journalism. journalism in 2011. I worked in local television for 5 years, mostly as a sports anchor and reporter. I got up to sports director at WRBL local TV in Columbus, Georgia. So we covered UGA, obviously, in the state. Auburn was only 45 minutes away. It was a really great experience just in terms of covering SEC athletics, local stuff in Columbus. A guy that your audience would know very well, Justin Ross, covered him in high school at Central High School in Phoenix City, Alabama. I just missed E.J. Williams. He kind of starred there after I left, but that it was a great path until, I started asking people my age, did they watch local TV? And they said no. Mm-hmm. So what my fear was is that I was going to get laid off in my 40s with no other marketable skills. So I had to pivot. And at the same time, I met my now wife, who is a speech therapist. And so our hours, if I'm on the anchor desk at 11 o'clock at night and, she's at home sleeping, we're just not going to see each other that much. So left that, became a high school teacher for a year, teaching audio and video production, left that and worked at a PR agency back up in Athens for a little over a year. And then I got the job at the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication as a PR specialist. So I like to say that in the day, I'm the storyteller of the storytellers. And then obviously with UGA Sports at night, I am the storyteller of the athletes. So it's kind of two ladders, climbing them at the same time and seeing where they lead from there.
So when you say PR specialist, just to be clear, you're not teaching PR. You actually are a part of their PR team. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I am on part of the external relations team. So that means website management, social media. And again, this is, for the College of Journalism and Mass Communication at UGA and not specifically for a football team or anything like that. So there's some lines that can be blurry there because technically I do receive one paycheck from the University of Georgia, and then I cover Georgia athletics on the other side. And I completely understand that and was trained by some of the best journalists in the world of how to be able to manage some of those situations. And, when it comes down to it, Larry, I think you've had the same experience, and fans may not understand it, but when you cover a team and it's your job, win or loss, you have work to do. And so a lot of the emotion can get pulled out of it. And so we're all fans of football, but, I am not a fan of winners and losers as much as I once was. I'm a fan of stories. And so, I'm sure that a lot of your audience think, oh, he's talking to a Georgia homer here. And, I love Athens. I love the University of Georgia. My family is rooted here. But it means something different to me than it does probably most fans.
Well, having just brought my family to Athens a few weeks ago for a leisurely weekend, I can tell you this: I am an Athens homer for sure. I love that town every time I go. Just it's amazing. I don't get there enough. It's so close. There's no reason not to go there on a regular basis.
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons that Georgia and Clemson should play every year. And we had Dabo Swinney on our podcast with Jim Donnan a couple of weeks ago. He said the same thing. And now I need to ask Kirby Smart and see what he says if Georgia and Clemson ought to play every year.
So with the Rivals site, is your job mainly the multimedia stuff, like the video podcasts and such? Y'all do that a lot. Is that your primary expertise there?
Yeah, when I first signed, and I guess it's been 3.5 years now, I got connected with Roddy Napolsky, the publisher of the site, and he had seen some of the game film breakdowns I was just doing on Twitter because I still had my skills to work with video. I knew a lot about football from people that I've talked to, obviously, so I was still doing that. And Roddy brought me on to kind of enhance the digital coverage that we have. So I've really taken charge of trying to elevate our presence on YouTube and our podcast feeds. I think I've got some pretty good broadcasting chops to be able to do some of the hosting, but obviously the digital work on the back end is helpful too. The other feature that we have, kind of continuing with that game film, it's one of our most popular pieces on UGAsports.com. It's called Film Don't Lie, which bothers me because it's grammatically correct. It's not correct grammatically, and I just screwed up even analyzing that phrase. days, but it needed to be relatable to the audience. And so me and then my partner on that series is Brent Rollins, who also does some work with Pro Football Focus. So he's kind of the data guy, and I'm kind of the video guy, and we kind of go back and forth on what we see, and that comes out every Sunday after a game day, and then we do some off-season content on it as well. Long answer to your question of yes, mostly digital coverage, some column writing, but it's this industry, as you said, it's changed, and you have to be good with words and video and photos and find ways to do it that's in a compelling way to stand out.
So funny. I was a guest on your podcast a couple of weeks ago with you and Brent, and it's Brent, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say Brett, but, and it was such a great conversation. Things are so emotionally charged between both fan bases and especially on message boards and social media that the responses I got on our message board was mainly, they were surprised. They're like, wow, those two guys actually sounded like they weren't crazy. And I'm impressed that they sounded like they were even-handed and objective. And I had to remind them, like, okay, one of the guys is really from Pro Football Focus, and his job, it's his job. And well, it's both of your jobs, of course. But you sort of have to remind them, like, hey, we're still professionals. And, while fans are maybe fighting in the stands, literally and fighting figuratively on social media with the guys who do it for a living, it's 99% respectful and professional.
Sure. I mean, some of my best friends that I've met have been fellow reporters, and there's kind of a kindredship with that. But, a lot of that comes with there's a right way and a wrong way to do this kind of work. And, that's not to say that you don't have interest in rooting for people, but it really does turn into, rather than rooting for a team to score a touchdown, you root for a person because of what their story is or where they've come from or what you've been able to witness because of, what it means in terms of humanity conquering something else. That's why we are attracted to sports, because whether it's a failure or a success, the season turns over and you get another shot at it more quickly than you do in real life. And so in that way, I think we're all trained that we want to be fair to the people that we cover. We want to be honest with them. Sometimes that means being critical, but for the most part, you're going to be rooting for good, compelling stories. And I think fans, whether they can admit it or not, that's what they root for as well.
All right, so over the last 20 years, I've been doing this, 10 years in newspapers, and then since 2008 with TigerIllustrated.com, frequently have interns and college kids who say, man, I really want to do this. What advice would you give me? And over the last decade or so, the advice has gone from, okay, well, you go to a small newspaper and you pay your dues. You do whatever they ask you to do. You cover high schools, and then you move up to colleges and so on. There's this ladder. Whereas more recently, when they ask me, I don't know what to say because the typical ladder has been just totally disfigured. And you seem like a great example of someone who's industrious and who is really diverse in your talents and the expertise that you seek, and you're doing a lot of different things. You might be sort of the poster child for the new age sports media type. What are your thoughts on that? And I'm sure you are sometimes asked by college kids, hey, how do I make a living at this? What do you tell them?
Well, one, that's quite a compliment, and thank you. I need to add that to my resume that I'm the prototype for the future. I think there's some basic foundational skills that are going to translate no matter the medium. You mentioned newspapers. You have to be able to write to do anything within this industry, even if it's just a small caption or a video. It may not be, a 1,200 word column or anything like that maybe the attention span of the past would have room for. But versatility, I think, is so key. When got hired on with Roddy, it's because I knew how to make a GIF and put it on Twitter. And I taught myself how to do that. It's not something I learned in college. It's Google searches and learn how to do things on YouTube and kind of be nifty with videos and being able to do it quickly because the stories move faster than ever. And so I think having skills that maybe other people don't know or aren't willing to learn, I think is always a good way to say, hey, I can do this. I can be an asset for your team in this way. But frankly, one of the reasons that I am not a 100% full-time journalist as I once was is because the industry has got some issues in terms of the business side of it that I think we've all seen. And I have a family of my wife and I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old daughter, and I needed stability in terms of health insurance and retirement. And again, I talked about that, local TV. I just didn't see that being the healthy way forward if I could help it. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing with newspapers. And I think local TV is probably on that same path. So my advice to people is develop your skill set in your portfolio, because more than ever, I think people don't care as much about where you worked. It's more about what you can do and how you can develop what they do. So there's a ton of outlets in Georgia and South Carolina that they need digital skill sets more than ever. And so younger people are going to be the ones, because they naturally have kind of consumed that and grown up in it, to lead the way and show people how to be better, whether it be on social media or websites or what have you. And there's still a ton of skills that I need to learn. But just in terms of the traditional sports reporting, I'd like to think that we bring something different to the table. And look, the competition is more steep than ever, because anyone can start a blog now. Anyone can start an Instagram page and throw news out there. We have to find ways to be different and unique to attract an audience.
How often is Jim Donnan on y'all's podcast?
So we do a flagship weekly show, which is UGA Sports Live. That's when Jim Donnan and Rodney Nabalsi and myself talk about whatever happened that week in UGA football. We also, during the season, have a second podcast with Brent Rollins, myself, and Jim Donnan, where it's more SEC and national college football centric. So during the season, twice, all the time once, and then occasionally we'll pop up with some other interviews, like the one that we did with Dabo Swinney, or we've done some with Paul Feinbaum, Mac Brown, Bruce Feldman. And frankly, I kid with him, but all of that is Coach Donnan's network of just saying this is something that we should be doing with his friends. And that's fun to do as well. Yeah,
it seems like Donnan's a part of the team, like he's, obviously the Dabo Swinney interview, I'm guessing, doesn't happen if the Donnan connection is not there and he doesn't call in that favor, right? So it seems like Coach Donnan is, and I covered him back in 99 and 2000 when I was at the Augusta paper, got to know him. It sounds like he's not just mailing it in, that he really is taking an active effort and being a part of y'all's team.
How dare you assert that I can't just make a phone call and get Dabo Swinney on our podcast? How insulting. Coach Donnan's Jim is a delight. He's become a family friend of mine. I go swimming at his pool from time to time. He's just a really good man. He cares about Athens, and obviously his connection to UGA is that he coached Kirby Smart. And so I think that's been thrilling for him to see a guy under his tutelage from the 90s lead the program now. And, his football connections and knowledge, it just surprises me every time of how much he knows and how many people he knows, and then how many people care about him. It's truly a testament to the legacy that he's created.
All right. So it's no secret that the media access in Athens with the football program is lacking, significantly lacking. In fact, a Georgia writer last week, who I will not name, texted me and said, man, it must be so much fun to cover a coach who actually gives y'all access to his program. How do you guys and girls get away or get around? I mean, you're supposed to still provide content, a high frequency of content. And yet sometimes there's nothing new. How do you get around it? Do you have to be really creative in, when for example, there's only like one player in a week or something like that? What is it like?
That's journalism, right? So yeah, you have to be creative, and if the people that you cover don't want to work with you to make it a little easier for you, you find stories, and that happens through relationships. And that's not something that you can snap your fingers and that happens. That's, in my case, 10, 12 years worth of work to get to know people. Some of it is luck at that point when you're in the same place. And I had a phone call with someone around the program for about an hour before I started talking with you. That is one of those things that it just happens, and there's some things you can share, some things you can't, but you build up and cover it the best that you can. And, I think that we all wish that the access was much better. And when you were telling me when you were on our show, of what Clemson has, there's just insane levels of jealousy. But it is what it is. We don't make those decisions. And, would previous coaching staffs be better? At least in my experience of covering Mark Richt, it was. Well, could it be worse? Yeah, it definitely could be worse too. So, is there a right or wrong way to do it from a football standpoint? I don't know. I know there's a way that I would prefer it. I think there's a way that fan bases would prefer it. I think it probably creates some false narratives when you are so secretive. So at the end of the day, I think access is a big deal. And especially, Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney are two of the most influential people in their states. You could argue that they're the most influential people in their states. And so there should be some level of openness that comes with that. So you just do the job. You meet people and you make connections and you try to talk to them and you build trust in them.
Okay, so getting to this matchup, it seems like from the outside looking in that the attrition that has struck Georgia's team, I guess you can include George Pickens, of course. That's longer term. We've known about that for a long time. But Eric Gilbert, his continued absence, and then David Paschall and I talked about a couple of the receivers, Karis Jackson and Burton, I guess, continue to be out. And then the more recent news, which seems like huge news, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Darnell Washington and Tyke Smith, apparently, and I think you guys reported it as well, they're out indefinitely. What's your take on all this, and how big is it in your mind?
The biggest concern is that so many of the injuries are happening at the same positions, wide receiver and tight end. You talk about going back to George Pickens. You don't replace George Pickens. That was already an uphill battle to climb just to figure it out from there, because he is one of the most dynamic receivers in college football, and he's going to be a really good professional receiver. He's the best at Georgia in the last 10 years, maybe going back to A.J. Green at wide receiver. And then you think, okay, well, Eric Gilbert's a really talented player. Whatever his situation is, it doesn't seem like he can be relied upon to be a contributor. Could he play against Clemson? Absolutely. Could he not? Absolutely. So that is the definition of not being relied upon. So I think that's the piece of the attrition that hits the hardest, and combine that with the fact that from a fan standpoint, the biggest question for Georgia in the last 3 years has been, where's the explosive passing attack? Because it's been obvious that whether it's Alabama last season, LSU the year before, Clemson in recent years, you have to have an explosive passing attack to win a national championship. And that seems to be what's been lacking at Georgia. A lot of confidence in JT Daniels, but he's got to throw the ball to someone. Although I would argue, and I think we even mentioned this when you were on with us, I think there's a lot of question marks with JT Daniels. I don't think that he should be a top 5 Heisman odds kind of guy. Can he get there? Sure, he's got the talent to do it, but the games he's played, it's not really proven against opponents the caliber of Clemson. And so I have a lot of worries about Georgia's offense, and can they overcome them? Sure, absolutely they can. There's so much talent on the field, and you don't recruit to the level that Georgia has and not have talented guys that can step in. But I'll just put it this way. If there was a season for Georgia to have some adversity before the first game, you would hope it would be against Charleston Southern and not Clemson.
Yeah. Do you think that the sort of hype or overhype for Daniels in the wake of how he performed late last year is overdone largely because it doesn't include the perspective of his predecessors couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And so, of course, he's going to look a lot better by comparison. And I'm speaking mainly, I guess, of that Florida game where final score does not indicate how close that game was because there were receivers running free left and right. And the two quarterbacks, I guess, who played in that game just couldn't come close to hitting them. Is that maybe the source of your concern that, okay, you mentioned his quality, Daniel's quality of competition wasn't that good, and then also maybe it's just magnified. Maybe his above average play is being magnified into something great because of the people who came before him weren't really good at all.
My concern goes back to his freshman season at USC, and I know he's a true freshman. I know that he was young. I know that things change, but his touchdown turnover ratio was not good. He threw way too many interceptions, and then this is one of the beauties of working with Brent Rollins at Pro Football Focus and the articles that we do. He had a lot more turnover-worthy plays, and you don't win titles, you don't beat good teams if you turn the ball over too much. In his small sample size at Georgia, it seemed like that had been rectified. Again, that's a small sample size against not the best competition. And I'll say this, once Georgia plays Clemson, the schedule gets tremendously easier up until the SEC championship game, which the assumption for people around Athens is that Georgia will be there and that Georgia should be there. So, I look at it and I say, can he, against a team like Clemson, which has a really good defensive front, I know cornerback is a bit of an issue, can he avoid turnovers? And his play at Georgia last season says yes. His much more comprehensive play at USC says that's going to be an issue. And so if Clemson can grab some 2 or 3 interceptions, I think it's game over, ball game.
And then another thing that sticks out to me is, and that could well decide this game, is on Clemson's end, dual threat quarterback who can definitely make things happen with his legs. Georgia, Daniels he's a pocket guy. He is not mobile by any definition, really. Correct me if I'm wrong. And to beat this Clemson defense that appears to be back in its element after sort of some rebuilding over 2 years, if you don't have somebody who can make things happen when plays break down and run the zone read, and I think even Todd Monken hit on this in his last visit with the media. I really thought it was interesting. And tell me what you think. But he said, we don't have that element of this offense that helps you move the ball and helps you be unpredictable with zone reads and things like that. We just don't have that kind of quarterback. Do you agree that could be a major factor it could be a major deciding factor in this game? Are you viewing that the same way? The difference? Yeah,
it's absolutely the case, because the thing that we've seen with football, how it's evolved, is that being able to extend plays, not necessarily running out of the pocket, which that's helpful too, but just being able to extend plays and helping the offensive line and receivers kind of catch a second life on a play rather than it being extinguished. That's a big deal, and Clemson has more of a chance to do that than Georgia, just based on the mobility of the quarterback. I don't think that it's much more complicated than if you begin to project forward. DJ Uiagalelei is
very nice job.
Thank you. I've been working very hard.
A+.
He is projected to be a future top 5 talent in an NFL draft. If you project JT Daniels forward, I think it's probably more of 5th or 6th round flyer. And that's not a shot against him. A lot of good quarterbacks in college football go at that in the NFL draft. But for whatever reason, it seems like Clemson, at least at a potential level, because, his DJ Uiagalelei, his resume is a little barren as well. He just hasn't had many opportunities to play. Also not against the best of the best competition. And I'm saying the Georgias and Alabamas there. I think the two quarterbacks have same resume issues, but let's be frank about it. Uiagalelei is a more talented player than JT Daniels. And so that is the primary reason that Clemson has an advantage beyond all the other injuries and anything else in this football game.
Now, as much as we've talked about Georgia fretting over how they're going to move the ball and score points, Clemson kind of has that element going too on with its offense, mainly because the offensive line, which was not good last year, had problems blocking not just Ohio State, but a number of other teams as well, particularly on the interior. And that is matched against Georgia's absolute strength. How good is this Georgia defensive line? And is my read on them, they're not just talented with the starters, but they have some outstanding depth as well. Is that the right read on it?
Absolutely. I mean, Georgia's defensive front is probably the best it's been maybe in my lifetime, at least going back to the days of Richard Seymour and Marcus Stroud, which was, Jim Donnan recruits that ended up playing some under Mark Richt at that coaching change. And even then, I don't know that there was the depth there. And that was one of the areas that Kirby Smart wanted to really revamp once he got to Georgia. Both sides of the trenches in the secondary. He fixed that. He felt good about it. And he's done pretty darn well in going into his 6th season as Georgia's head coach. And Jordan Davis should be in the NFL right now. He decided to come back to Georgia. Devontae Wyatt, he could be in the NFL right now, came back to Georgia. You start looking at Jalen Carter and Trayvon Walker. There's just so much versatility. I mean, in watching the game film, you see a guy like Trayvon Walker who is, I think, something like 6'4", 290, and he's sprinting out with running backs in the flat. And like staying with them to be able to cover in coverage. It's ridiculous the amount of athleticism on this defense. A lot of former basketball players over there. Jalen Carter even caught a touchdown on offense last year in one of the jumbo packages. So, they're really good athletes. It's not just the big hog mollies, as a lot of people like to think. And you start, branching back out to the linebackers, and Kobe Dean is one of the best middle linebackers in the country. And you don't have to look far beyond LSU 2 seasons ago to, when you have really good linebackers in the middle, it just makes everything else so much easier. There's more room for error because they cover so much space. And he is true freshman SEC championship game. Kobe Dean was sprinting out widest part of the field to cover Clyde Edwards-Helaire and held his own and stopped him from catching passes on inside slants. And so that was as a true freshman. Now he's a junior and he's healthy. So Georgia's defensive front's really good. And Clemson, I do think will have some issue running the football.
So obviously the feeling is Georgia's had some issues defending the pass, as you mentioned. The feeling over there is, okay, you can cover up a lot of issues if you're dominant on the line of scrimmage. That said, what is the feeling? I mean, now with Tyke Smith likely out, and I had some questions about him to begin with because I don't know how much man coverage he played at West Virginia, really. What is the feeling about the back end right now of Georgia's defense that's going to have to cover some really tall and athletic receivers of Clemson's?
From a safety position, it's led by Lewis Seen, and he's just a headhunter. He's improved his coverage ability, but he is such a physical, hard tackler. Georgia feels pretty good about him and Christopher Smith, who stepped in and played in the Peach Bowl against Cincinnati at the safety spots. There's a lot of age and talent, I would say there, even though Christopher Smith is not the highly rated recruit that Richard LeCount was, that started for 4 years at Georgia. He's an athletic guy, and it's kind of his time to shine. So I think that they feel good about that. Like you said, that star position gets a little wonky without Tyke Smith. You had concerns about the man versus zone coverage. I had concerns just with his overall size, a little bit undersized for what Georgia typically likes at that position. Fortunately, Latavius Brini is still on the team, and he's back, and I think Georgia feels good about him contributing there, even in Tyke Smith's absence. Most of the question marks are going to be at cornerback, and that's again, I think I did this in a tweet with you, the Spider-Man meme where they're looking at each other and pointing. That's Georgia and Clemson looking in a mirror where there's some weaknesses at cornerback. Obviously, Darion Kendrick, DK, being at UGA is experience. That helps a lot. You know he's going to be amped up for this game. You also know that the receivers on Clemson's side are going to be amped up to burn him. So that's just going to be fascinating endlessly. And the other probably starting corner is going to be Keely Ringo. And he is one of the highest rated recruits that Georgia has gotten in recent years. And he missed all of last season injured his freshman year. So this is his first college football game. I think he may have played, some special team stuff, some garbage time stuff. Like, this is his first real assignment, and the talent is unquestioned. I mean, he is his name is buzzing from practice, but that's still unproven. And so who's he going to be matched up on? It's going to be a really good receiver. Can it be a star out the gate? Potentially. But, for me, I always want to see it with these guys first, because I don't care what level of football you played when it's a Georgia versus Clemson. You find out who's really ready for that moment.
It sounds like we're both predicting 16-13 either way.
I'm never predicting that, only because, you look at these big games. I was telling someone earlier this week, it's like, the concerns on Georgia's offense is you're not going to beat a Clemson 18-14 or something like that. I think the team that scores mid-30s is going to be the one that wins this game. And I think Clemson is more likely to do that. Georgia absolutely can. The talent is there, but man, I'd feel a lot better about Georgia's chances if the quarterback situation was reversed.
You think Georgia, even with all this attrition, can put up 30 plus?
Honestly, no. I do think the talent is there, that like things could happen if the defense gets a score, if you get the special teams kind of thing. If you're asking me, do I think the offense can go out there and score 5 touchdowns? I would find that to be unlikely.
Yeah. Okay, we know. So Clemson, in terms of people they hate the most, South Carolina is off the map because they're just so bad. Florida State, same thing. Georgia fans are who Clemson fans despise the most right now. I think that's 100% clear. I think they more respect Alabama than despise them. But Georgia's just so close, and they're in the same towns, and they hear from them more, and there's more strife. What do Georgia fans right now think of Clemson fans, and where are they in the, I guess, where is Clemson in the hatred hierarchy of Georgia fans?
Georgia has so many rivals, so this conversation gets muddied so quickly, right? So, like, the top 3 for most any Georgia fan, and it's going to depend on geography, but then also age, because different eras, I think, dislike different teams more. Florida, number 1. That's the Chief. Steve Spurrier took that to a new level in the 90s, and Urban Meyer and his crew in the 2000s, and the geography of Georgia and Florida. That's a big deal. Auburn is also right there. And then, there's a segment of the fan base, although I do think it's waning a little bit because it's been so one-sided with Georgia Tech. And, that's, I think a rivalry almost needs to be more competitive sometimes, but, you let Georgia lose to Georgia Tech one time, and that feels like the most shameful, embarrassing thing in the history of University of Georgia. So it only takes one time for that one to get reignited. I'm sure for some people in Northeast Georgia off I-85 or, some of the Georgia people that live in South Carolina and North Carolina, I'm sure Clemson's higher on their list. But honestly, I would say for most people, it doesn't crack the top 5 because they're not playing regularly. I would think Tennessee's probably higher on that list. South Carolina's probably right there just because a lot of Georgia fans have had bad experiences in Williams-Brice Stadium, both on the field and off of it. And, if anything, I think there's a level of jealousy that Clemson has gotten over whatever hump that Georgia hasn't. Yeah. And I do think that there is a segment of the fan base that, and I'm sure you hear this all the time from other fan bases, that Dabo Swinney's good old boy Mayberry routine that gets old after you win a few national championships. And while it was endearing and enticing at first, I think a lot of fans get tired of the little old Clemson routine. It's not little old Clemson anymore. It's powerhouse Clemson. And so maybe there's a level of honesty that fans will want more about that. But I really do think that's more about Dabo and not necessarily Clemson fans. But, that's also in the circles that I'm around. So that's going to be different for different segments of the fan base. Yeah,
the deeper context you referenced in terms of recent years, the last 5 or 6 years, Clemson has what Georgia wants, and they did it. They got those 2 trophies with 2 quarterbacks from the Peach State, including, and you can feel free to disagree, but the casual recruiting of Deshaun Watson by Mike Bobo and Mark Richt is going to go down in infamy because he wanted to go there, but they slow played him. They, who was it? Bryce Ramsey that they were hot and heavy for? who ended up being a punter, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that could have changed the whole course of not just Georgia football, but Clemson football, because Clemson, if Georgia gets him, Clemson doesn't. And then
you start thinking about the butterfly effect on that.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. This is kind of hypothetical world, but there's some reporting behind it as well. Let's say Deshaun Watson ends up at Georgia. That probably lengthens Mark Richt's time at Georgia, because he would have been a tremendous starting quarterback, assuming all things are equal. Although I think if Deshaun Watson were to tell you honestly, he was able to do more at Clemson than he probably would have been allowed to do at Georgia at that time frame, regardless. Yeah. If Mark Richt doesn't get fired, Kirby Smart doesn't get hired. What was the job that was available for Kirby Smart that was floated out there that probably helped Greg
South
McGarity?
Carolina.
It was South Carolina that the flirtation was happening. So if Deshaun Watson doesn't end up at Clemson, does that mean Kirby Smart ends up at South Carolina and Clemson fans have to see him in that capacity trying to build that program?
And I go back even further. I mean, Georgia fans want to kill me for saying this because it's probably torture, but I go back to Cam Newton. Mark Richt told him he was a tight end. I'm sorry, but if you start there, then you're able to get Deshaun Watson, and then you're probably able to get Trevor Lawrence as well. It's a quarterback factory, but I think you make a great point. The Richt offense wasn't as conducive to Deshaun Watson flourishing or Cam Newton flourishing like they did. He was just sort of behind that curve, so to speak, more traditional, I guess. And so I think that's a great point for sure.
And maybe, he evolves and he gets there. I think Mark Richt gets a bit of a bad rap for the end. I mean, Georgia still recruited really well. It's just Kirby Smart has done it better consistently. And the same problems that Georgia had in terms of talent at quarterback, I mean, I think you could argue that it's kind of the same thus far. Mm-hmm. Was Jake Fromm much better than Aaron Murray, or do we know that JT Daniels is much better than them? Justin Fields was, but he didn't stay at Georgia. And that's, going to be in the crawl of Georgia fans for a long time for how that situation was handled, because in retrospect, it's absolutely 100% clear. I even go back to a decision that doesn't get as much chatter is in the season that Georgia goes to the national championship game. When Jacob Eason is healthy again, should he not? I mean, I know Jake Fromm led Georgia, if you want to say, it was a low-scoring game to a win at Notre Dame. But if Jacob Eason was the most talented quarterback, should he not have gotten his job back? Mm. I mean, that's playing against the result at that point, because Jake Fromm helped lead Georgia to a national championship appearance and get to overtime. But, the job as a coach is to play the best quarterback. And if at the beginning of the season it was Jacob Eason, what changed in 3 weeks?
Dayne Young, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you joining us, and really, really looking forward to this matchup, I guess, which is now 15, 16 days away.
It's going to be great. I'm excited to have some fresh football to talk about, because I feel like it's been a couple of off seasons at this point.
Absolutely. Have a good one, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Larry.
All right, that was great, getting some Georgia perspective. Also, always enjoy talking the industry type stuff. For some of you younger folks out there, maybe students who are aspiring to do something sports related, the media world, all that stuff. Really interesting perspective on both counts with David Paschall and Dayne Young. Appreciate them. Also appreciate our very loyal 6 sponsors of the podcast. And most important, thanks to all of you for hitting play every week. Appreciate it. Everybody be safe. Have a great weekend. Cheers.